Hi, we're here again with Allison Cook, and she's come out with her second volume.
Mhm.
And Allison, tell us a little bit about the book and how it fits into the series.
All right. Well, this is The Scholar, the Sphinx, and the Thing of Fenrir. It's part of the Scholar and the Sphinx series of young adult fantasy slash historical fiction books. And this one takes place 2 years after the first one left off. Our main character is David Sandoval. In the first book, he was 16 years old. He's from Cervera, Spain. So in this book, he's 18 years old. He's actually married in this one. At the end of book one, he got married. And this is a new story arc. So it doesn't so much, while we see characters from the first book return in this one, it's a new adventure, it's a new story with some old enemies returning, new enemies coming into the mix. So it's just a lot of different things going on. And I've told people that it can stand on its own. It has a recap
Right,
prologue. So.
right. Well, I read it and I enjoyed it, and it does stand on its own. Um, I'm going to change the order. This is all spontaneous, so I'm going to change the order of one
I'm
of the
good with
questions I
that.
came up with in your overview there. 18 years old, kind of young by our standards. Now, this takes place in the 1600s.
Actually, 1800s.
Sorry,
So yes,
1800s.
1854 is in the
1854, that's right.
Mhm.
You mentioned specific battles. There's a lot of historical context in this.
Yes.
Very, very specific things. So, was there any hesitation, or is it 18 because that's a standard age at this time, or what were your thoughts on that?
Well, in the Victorian era, it was common for a lot of people to get married very young. In fact, in the first book, there's reference to another character who was in her mid-20s, and characters were saying, well, she doesn't marry soon, she's going to be alone the rest of her life.
Right, right.
So it's typical for the time period, but also for David's character. In the first book, he's sort of getting emotional, romantic feelings for different characters, and in a way, when he meets the person who becomes his wife,
Yeah.
I mean, he does love her. He romantically falls in love with her, but in a way, it's also to move on. It's his way of kind of moving on past
Okay.
people who he had to let go.
Okay. All right. Well, now here's my real first question. What is the curtain, and what's on the other side of it?
Okay, yes, that is the common theme throughout the entire series. Is the curtain is the sort of invisible, mystical veil between the human world and the world where all of the creatures and people from myth and legend have gone to reside. They're no longer part of the human world. They're in this separate parallel world. So David travels between his world and the other world through this curtain. And what's kind of fun about the curtain is you can enter it in one place. He first enters it in France when he's traveling to Paris, France, and he wants to go back home. He walks out the way he came in and ends up in Japan.
Right, but
So,
in that sense, it's sort of like a teleportation device.
exactly.
But let's go a little further, because I'm assuming now that you've been on the other side of the curtain. I mean, I know I have.
Probably when I shouldn't be.
I mean, because and what is real? Well, which is reality now? Which is reality? This side or the other side of the curtain?
I guess it depends which reality helps preserve your sanity at the time. And I think even one of the characters in the first book says, well, reality is so much as what your five senses can interpret,
Mhm.
what you see, what you smell, what you touch. But so reality can really be very different for different people. And if you have a really deep imagination, that can be as real as
Is
reality.
that important for younger readers to understand the curtain and the sort of other world of imagination? Is that important?
Oh, absolutely. I believe it was Einstein who said that imagination can be as important or more important than knowledge,
Right.
because that's where creation comes from. You can have knowledge, that's a good foundation for what you want to do with your life, but you need to have imagination to create new
Wow,
things.
that's terrific. Of course, he's famous for imagining what it would be like to ride a light beam, and so that's how he got his idea for the
Right.
theory.
And I say we may do it someday, but it'll take some imagination of
Right.
how we get there.
Right. Okay. So David is one of these people who goes back and forth across the curtain. Um, but that's, just in a way, I mean, that's part of all many young people's fiction kind of thing, the other world or their special coming to grips with reality, okay?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But there's some things in there that are really very serious stuff. So you have, and I don't want to give away the plot, but you have someone inform David the hero that if you're serious about things, and if it's a life or death issue, you may have to be willing to kill somebody. And I want to add something to this too. Now, you might have a different interpretation, but there is a point in there where he actually, I want to say actually, kills somebody, or if it would, in the real world he would have. I mean, let's put it that way.
Right.
So how did you, that's a very serious kind of thing. How did you, when you were writing this, how did you try to deal with this?
Well, it's good. A lot of YA novels, especially the popular ones, are dealing with that subject, and some readers have comments like, this is really heavy for young readers. I mean, Harry Potter's dealt with it.
Right.
Hunger Games is all about that.
Okay, well,
Much
okay,
saying,
yeah,
who's
actually,
never died.
yeah, no, actually, you're exactly so right on. I mean, I didn't want to lead into it with my own references to popular culture, but of course, this is not new for you, or but I mean, new in popular fiction. So wow.
But that's kind of one thing that helps transition young characters into realizing that the world is not always a safe place that they may have grown up being taught. I know a lot of parents want to shelter their children from the ugliness of the world, but eventually you're going to face an ugly situation. Right. And it was interesting because that scene you're referring to was they accidentally stumble upon the Crimean War of 1854. And when I was writing that scene, or shortly after I wrote that scene, the Crimean War that happened in 2014 reference started showing up on the news.
Yes, right.
And I was totally not aware of that at the time. Like, history really does repeat itself, and the
Right.
same scenarios do show
Right.
up.
So we live in a dangerous world. I mean, still, yeah, all the time. And so. And if you think back in children's fiction, this is also true of Grimm's fairy tales. They're really grim.
They had to
They're
water them
horrific.
down. Yeah, but see, they're frightening.
Yes.
I mean, any Disney version you've seen has been extremely watered down. The endings usually always change.
Right. There's some frightening stuff in here. There's the one now. What was it? The Ilio.
Oh, Ilomba. Yes.
Yeah, that scene in there, which comes early on in the book. I don't know about you, but I was scared.
It's scary, and that comes from actually African folklore, which in general is very scary, and I love it. The more I started researching it, I really started.
Well, the way you describe it is really excellent and very, very real and very, very scary.
Well, that's what I was going for, because life is scary. Sometimes.
Okay, so let's. I think we've only touched on it, but let's keep it short. Baba Yaga.
Yes.
Yeah, it's my favorite character. And how did you come upon this idea, and why did you choose to incorporate her?
Okay, well, I knew for this book, with each book I have 3 different world mythologies. So where the first one was Greek, Japanese, and Native American, this one was Norse, Russian, and African folklore.
Okay.
So obviously if I was going to go Russian mythology, Baba Yaga had to be in there. And one of my biggest, I don't know if it's a crutch or just something I like to do, is taking famous villainous characters from mythology and showing they're not all bad.
Right.
Like, there's a reason for why they act the way they do. I try to bring a little bit of humanity into them. So I liked the concept of Baba Yaga not being totally wicked as she's normally depicted.
She's got some of the best lines. And I love the way you do the Russianized American. She always leaves out the word the. And it's very
a little
funny.
Broken.
It's very funny, yeah.
And honestly, some of that was based on my mother. To be honest, some of her characters, some of her characteristics, and the way she thinks, the way she talks, was based on my mom, who's not Russian.
Oh, okay.
But just, let's say, her thought process and the way she interacts with people.
Wow. Okay. Wow. Okay. Well, that's it. Let's say goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Yes, thank you.